episode 82 of Grace and Steel. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.
It's almost half a century since British MP Enoch Powell gave his famous Rivers of Blood speech. The April 20th, 1968 address, a prescient warning against the evils of immigration, might better be called infamous because the British establishment was unanimous in condemning it as racial hatred. The people of Britain, however, a vast majority, agreed with Powell. And despite the fact that he was a conservative, it was Labour voting working men who were his biggest champions, with the London dock workers taking to the streets. Fearful, perhaps, of the great political realignment the Birmingham speech portended, the incompetent opposition leader Edward Heath, a likely pederast, dismissed Powell from his position of shadow defense minister. Rivers of Blood was a response to the Race Relations Act of 1968, which gave statutory protection against discrimination to racial minorities, an act Powell believed would sow such discord that Britons would believe that their, quote, country will not be worth living in for their children, unquote. On May 22nd, the bombing of an Ariana Grande concert at the Manchester Arena killed 22 and injured another 59. Witnesses described the survivors as being splattered with the blood and guts of the dead, many of them young girls. As an aside, let me say if this had happened back in Powell's day in 1968, the bomber probably would have targeted a Lulu concert, timing the blast to coincide with the final strains of To Sir With Love, which topped the Billboard charts a few short months before Powell's speech. The bomber was described as a Briton of Libyan descent. Salman Abedi, a 22-year-old second-year student at Salford University studying business and management. His father and brother have been arrested and detained in Libya in connection with the bombing. He was known to authorities, and his jihadist beliefs were reported to them, but they did nothing, doubtless because they were afraid of being condemned as racists. Enoch was right, as they say, though this is little consolation to the host of girls and boys, and men and women, whose blood is poured into the multicultural river. Kevin, what does Powell's Rivers of Blood speech teach us today?
Well, it teaches that politics has been, throughout our lifetime, and to this present day, is what the British would call a stitch-up, or what others would call a criminal conspiracy.
Criminal because of what happened at Manchester? Is that what you mean?
That's part of it.
Sense?
I mean,
okay.
Democracy is supposed to mean the power of the people. That's
Mm-hmm.
what it means literally, and that's how people understand it. The overwhelming majority of the British people did not want their immigration policy, but they got it. And worse, and worse, and worse.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, as we've mentioned on the podcast before, about 10 years ago, some PR spiv working for Tony Blair or Gordon Brown spilled the beans. Purpose of our immigration policy is to make sure that the right wing can never win again.
Okay, so over the last 50 years, that's been their goal, essentially, is to eliminate the political opposition. Hasn't it been something a little more than that, though? I mean, they are bringing in people to, I guess, smash wages. That's why I assume the dock workers supported Powell. I mean, it was a union matter back then.
Well, it was more than a union matter. They were patriotic. Mm-hmm. The politicians were traitors. I'll repeat that. Traitors then and traitors now. As far as criminal conspiracy, the first line, Powell's speech, is the supreme function of statesmanship is to provide against preventable evils. What has happened in the West with immigration, particularly from the third world, was a preventable evil. Now, there are some people, some politicians, some members of the elite, who I suppose were naive enough or stupid enough to think at the beginning that the terrible things that have happened, not merely terrorist attacks, but the dispossession of Western peoples from their own countries. Perhaps they didn't think these things would happen. But it's been a long time. It's been 49 years since Powell's speech. And what he predicted has come to pass. And what we see is now a typical response to our from our elite to a challenge.
Mm.
The initial response is, this is outrageous. This man is a madman and or evil. He must never be allowed to speak again, etc., etc.
Right.
And the final step is, he was right. Yeah, so what? What are you going to do about it?
I guess that's where we are at this point. I guess we're going to talk about it. What I'd like to hear, though, if you can provide us with a little more context, because it seems like at that time, 1968, this was a global, at least a phenomenon throughout the West, with the 1965 immigration revision in the United States and something similar happening in Canada. And then
in 67, yes.
Yeah. What was going on? Why did the Western world decide at that time that, we were going to throw the doors open, or that immigration suddenly became a topic that you could no longer talk about in respectable circles? What happened at that time? What was going on?
Well, a bunch of things. Various minorities were keen to reduce the majority because they feared that they would be subject to persecution, or simply because they didn't like the majority. That's one of the things that was going on.
Okay.
Another thing was that, I don't know, well, let's go back to Powell, his speech. He said that, above all, people are disposed to mistake predicting troubles for causing troubles and even for desiring troubles. If only, they love to think, if only people wouldn't talk about it, it probably wouldn't happen. Perhaps this habit goes back to the primitive belief that the word and the thing, the name and the object, are identical. In other words, the map is not the territory, to use the expression. Powell was opposing something which became very powerful in the 1960s. Now, it didn't arise out of the 1960s, but this idea that, we're better people than we've ever been in history, and people are different, perhaps fundamentally different, that if we all just agree to get along, then we will get along. There's many problems with that formulation, not least of which is, what if the people that we're trying to get along with don't want to get along with us?
Right.
Because after, 49 years after Powell's speech, in Britain today, you can go to The Guardian, or you can go to The Telegraph, you can go to the BBC, you can go to private radio and television, and you will see all of these pampered minorities, including recently Cambridge University students, whining about how miserably oppressed they are. This is after half a century of groveling and gibes without end being thrown at them. So at this point, I'm not willing to grant sincerity to anyone on the other side of this argument. No one. I mean, I suppose unless they're children. Literally children, I mean.
Okay. It just seemed that there seemed to be some kind of consensus amongst the Western world that racism has suddenly become the worst thing in history. As somebody wrote a few days back, that, the shitlib devil is racism. It seemed to turn around the mid-60s there, and I'm not sure why in Western culture it did.
It's not Western. We're talking about the elite here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're talking about the elite.
Yeah.
Now, in the 1960s, British parents were still buying gollywog dolls for their children.
Right.
And hardly anyone thought that was even worth mentioning. I don't know, a couple of decades later, they're hunting down and destroying these innocent dolls?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so, I mean, we can pin it down to taking off around then. I'm just curious, why Powell felt he had to make this speech. I mean, he obviously saw Britain changing, and he had people telling him that they no longer felt at home in Britain. That's embedded in the speech. I'm just wondering why it happened at the same time in the U.S., and it was happening in Canada at the same time. Was this great liberal shift, it seemed, or liberalism shift? And I don't know what the common factor is.
Well, I think that part of it is naivety and part of it is malevolence.
Right, okay.
Now, you could look what happened in Canada. We're coming up to our 150th 50th anniversary on July the 1st. And I predict this on Twitter. I'll predict it here. I fully believe that on July the 1st, or sometime coming up to July the 1st, Justin Trudeau, our Prime Minister, will apologize for the existence of Canada itself.
Mm-hmm. He seems on that kind of rampage. I know that he's demanding an apology from the Pope regarding the residential schools.
The Pope already apologized.
That was a lead-in. I was setting
already apologized. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you go ahead and say it.
No. It just 1967, our 100th anniversary. I remember it. Now we are 20 million. That dreadful song. But I don't know. People seem to feel pretty good about the place. You know?
Oh yeah.
And that was the year that our immigration law was fundamentally changed. Mm-hmm. And you have the hatred of the nation itself. But you also have what Edgar Allan Poe called the imp of the perverse. Mm. And I suppose there's an element of sheer boredom. We need to shake things up. But things not might turn out so well. Well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, none of those guys, none of those politicians from that era survive. They're all passed on.
They're all passed on. It's not too late to dig up their corpses and burn them.
Okay. For all the good it would do us. But,
no, I know. Seriously, these people, going back to, the post-war British governments, going back to Winston Churchill, we're going to bring in all of these people from the Caribbean. Well, why? Well, to lower wages. It's that simple, to lower wages. And the Labour Party found out that, these people were disposed to voting for the Labour Party. So you have this bipartisanship whereby the Conservatives want immigrants to lower wages. The Labour Party wants immigrants so that the Conservative Party will never win again. And the Libertarian Spurgs see an increase in the GDP. Now, how the GDP is divvied up, they're not interested in that. They see GDP has become the savage god that not that long ago, you only saw that acronym in the financial pages, but now apparently we have to worship it.
Yeah, actually, there was that one guy that was pointing out his best tweet ever occurred after the Manchester bombing.
I'll get to that in just a minute, but I want to point out something about Enoch Powell. His enemies, like Tony Benn, who accused him of inciting hatred and accused him of hating people of color, as we call them now, they were lying. And what's worse, they knew they were lying. Because Enoch Powell's fondness for the people of India was well known. The many white politicians then and now are learning Hindi? No, there weren't. And Enoch Powell's most famous speech before Rivers of Blood was a speech he made in the House of Commons, I believe in 1959, a ferocious denunciation of his own government for the killing of Mau Mau prisoners in Kenya. And he said that, it's argued that, we can't have the same standards there as here. And he said, yes, we must have the same standards there and here. And this idea that we should be allowed to get away with killing black people because it's Kenya was abhorrent. So his enemies knew very well that Enoch Powell did not hate people of color.
Okay, fair enough. But, and there was some suggestion in the online articles regarding this Rivers of Blood speech that it actually, the people agreeing with Powell inadvertently handed the victory to Heath because he got some bounce out of it because so many people agreed with Powell. Which is odd, I guess, Well,
there's the contemptible line taken by Peter Hitchens, which is that, Enoch Powell was right, for the most part, or overwhelmingly, but he shouldn't have said it.
Because people's feelings were hurt? Did he explain why he shouldn't have said it?
I
It was the wrong thing at
can't
the wrong
remember
time?
exactly. It is so stupid. The idea is what? That, they get to call us racists. Well, guess what, Peter? They're going to call you a racist anyway. And racism doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's a term of no efficacy. We can attach to this in the show notes, as everyone calls them now, a copy of Peter Simple's column explaining what racism actually is, but what it has become. My joke, a week ago or a couple of weeks ago, is that racism is to the modern mind as self-abuse was to the Victorian mind. That is the cause of all evils.
Right.
Now this fellow
the devil.
This fellow on NPC.com, Rice and Beans, he calls himself, or NAP Watch on.
This is the tweet you're talking about?
Yeah. On Twitter. Foreign-born terrorism is a hazard, now Reste argues, and I believe this is Alex Nareste of the Cato Institute. But it is manageable given the huge economic benefits of immigration and the small costs of terrorism, unquote. And he responded, sorry your daughter had to die, but it was for the GDP, so I hope that brings you some comfort.
Mm-hmm. Savage tweet, savage.
Well, there was also, I got into it a few days, during the conservative convention with this young conservative, Zach Voff, his name is, who had written a couple of months ago. It was probably a side effect of being constantly connected, but it seems like global uncertainty is a lot more present in our lives. I can remember when the latest international horror could be turned off. It was helpful, necessary. Now, unfortunately, it's nearly impossible. Even if you ditch your phone, everyone around you isn't going to do the same. We're all in this together. This has its advantages. The globalized, digitally networked capitalist world order has helped hundreds of millions of people out of abject poverty and will likely finish the job before the century is out. If feeling like disaster could strike at any moment is the main side effect, that's fine. Now,
yeah, that's called PTSD.
He might want to have another go at this, okay? Because this phrase, finish the job, it has a rather Nazi-esque tinge,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And disaster could strike at any moment is the main side effect. This is terror we're talking about.
Yeah, I know. This is the condition of post-traumatic stress disorder, You basically assume that evil is lurking around every corner, right? You're paranoid and constantly stressed out. It's supposedly completely debilitating. So that's an acceptable side effect? I don't think so.
Now, hundreds of millions of people out of abject poverty. Well, you see, how many of those millions have come here and made us poorer?
Mm-hmm.
It made us not just poorer, but destroyed our community, our sense of community.
Right.
And in terms of hauling millions of people out of abject poverty, obviously there's been improvements in the third world, no question about it. But the reluctance of libertarians to talk about things like suicide nets in Chinese factories suggests that, as I told this young man, that Dire Straits hit, Sting sang on it. I want my GDP. This is it. This is
money
all
nothing,
it means for them.
Yeah, and how many can be saved from it anyway? Because you saw that gumball guy video, right? The guy who did the immigration and the gumball comparisons. Did you see that at all?
I have seen it, yes.
Yeah, I'll link to it. I guess gives you an idea of the scope of the population and how little will be saved from abject poverty by immigration. And essentially, we're not really doing the countries that we're taking the immigrants from a whole lot of favors if we're taking their.
Well, I'm not, anyway. That's a secondary consideration, but it's true enough, as others have pointed out, that this is essentially the Roman approach, asset stripping.
Right. Yeah. Okay. But it's more the numbers, the sheer numbers, that makes the impact of that video. What makes the whole concept so daunting and possibly Well, not even possible. They make it obviously completely unattainable anyway. But
I wanted to talk about the circumstances of this Manchester attack because I don't think that Enoch Powell would have understood them. I mean, what I mean by that is, I think that if he had been able to see, the headlines or read the stories in the Telegraph or the Guardian and the Times, he would have believed that he had gone mad. First of all, we have this woman who calls herself, amusingly, Ariana Grande, who is the epitome of pedophilia chic. She resembles a 12-year-old girl, and yet we are confidently informed that she is a great sex symbol. Now, she was playing the Manchester Arena, which holds 20,000 people, which gives you an idea of her popularity. She was on the Dangerous Woman tour, and I guess she was, getting together this idea. Katy Perry was also hooked into it too. The idea of Hillary Clinton. Ooh, I'm one of those nasty women, but, I will persist. Right?
Right. Yeah. Is that what she was doing? Is that the whole purpose of the... Okay.
She's got these rabbit ears on.
Oh.
In the branding for the concert tour.
Ah, okay.
And
I think to
the extent that she turns herself into a sex object associated with the Playboy clubs of the 1960s, how this makes her dangerous, I can't understand. But let's talk about this fellow called Martin Hett, described as gay journalist and PR manager. Oh, another PR spiff. All right. So people found some tweets of his.
He's a victim, right?
He's one of the victims.
He's one of the victims, okay.
Just horrendous. I have a select group of straight male friends who are iconic, but other than them, I propose mass genocide. The biggest casualties of ISIS attacks have been Muslims. These terrorists may identify as Muslim, but they are sick. What is it with straight people drinking their drinks at the bar post-purchase? Fucking move. I want to get served. The comment thread on the Muslim attack story is giving me a nervous breakdown. White English bigots claiming to be oppressed. And then the amount of married Muslim taxi drivers that have taken me home for free in the hope of a quick blowy. It melts my heart every time. And this became a meme on the internet with the headline, "You got served, blowy." Now, there's a picture of this fellow Martin Hett. Have you seen it?
I can't say I have, no, but I'll find it.
He's got a pudding bowl haircut. He's wearing a white t-shirt. He's wearing denim overalls, which have been cut off above the knee, with one of the straps unhooked. That the idea that this, pardon my French here, that this fuck toy, why would we be interested in anything this fellow had to say? Now, and
we're only interested post murder, though.
Well, you see that that these people are being devoured by the monster that they have helped create and are sustaining.
Mm-hmm.
That you must love multiculturalism, diversity of all kinds, and if you don't, we will attack you. We will destroy you.
I did see something about his parents.
Oh, his parents just piled on. Oh, no, they're not going to let the haters win. No, that's what Ariana Grande said. What the parents said was it's that they're not taking this personally, or they're not blaming the killer, or they're not hating him, or...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I guess that is the only way to really preserve what their son said without sniggering at the irony of it. That's the sad part for them. Or maybe they just thought their son was disposable anyway. Who knows?
No, but
if he can die for our cause, even better.
If you see, going back to this idea of preventable evils, the multiculturalism, although I don't know that word was used in 1968, the incipient multiculturalism that Powell was campaigning against, it's become this vast system. It's become this universal solvent which has destroyed everything that we knew to be true. No one in 1968, except for some homosexual monster like Tom Dryburgh, a communist traitor, by the way, and British MP, would have looked at the advent of someone like Martin Hett with anything but horror.
Right.
And yet this is the world that we live in now. That it is, on the one hand, these attacks on Martin Hett after his death are deplorable or wicked, but what else can one say?
Other than he would have been proud to die in this way, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, because he was, propagating this type of thing.
We had an attack in Canada, or a near disaster in Canada a couple of years ago when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister. You remember that?
Yes, indeed.
Where one of these lone wolves got into the precincts of Parliament. And
mother was an immigration functionary or something, yeah.
And he, sudden immigrant jihad syndrome, I believe they call it.
Mm.
And he was looking to kill some people, and Stephen Harper was shut in a closet, and a lot of people had fun with this. The killer opened the wrong door. If he'd opened the right door, we might have a very different political situation in Canada and elsewhere. We might, but I wonder if we would, and I wanted to ask you about that. Okay. Imagine that Stephen Harper or Jason Kenney or some other cabinet minister had been killed, or several of them had been killed by this Islamic terrorist. What do you think the result would have been? Do you think that there would have been a revulsion so strong that Canadian government or subsequent Canadian governments would be forced to change tack, reverse? Or do you think that the dead cabinet ministers and perhaps prime minister would be seen as a martyr to the cause of immigration and multiculturalism, such that we must increase our efforts because of their sacrifice?
Well, I'm going to use a very Canadians will recognize this phrase and you will recognize it. I would say, just watch me. Because we have the parallel already. What happens when politicians get attacked in this country? There's a severe reaction in which, I guess the entire country gets shut down, as they did in the FLQ crisis.
Yeah, this is the October 1970 crisis, as it's known, right, when Pierre Trudeau put the entire country under martial law because 2 people had been kidnapped.
That's right, and he was asked how far would you go, and he said, just watch me, indicating that he was prepared to go a lot farther. Now, that's what happens when politicians get kidnapped and killed. I assume that it would have to have it would be the same type of response. All Canadians are responsible and must pay a price for this. I don't think that they could get away with your second option, which is we must double down. I think it's security for all, and all Canadians are suspect at this point, Okay. We lose all rights.
All right.
We lose all rights. We must continue, of course, with the immigration, and we must continue to allow the multicultural policy of the day. But, we got to clamp down on this freedom thing here.
Okay, well, here's something from the Toronto Star 2 days ago by Tony Berman, who I believe was the head of CBC News for some time. Mm-hmm. Later went to work for Al Jazeera. It's called How Trump is Helping Terrorists. How Trump is helping terrorists. In family photographs, the innocent victims of the Manchester bombing look so young and happy. Each of them stares back at us, a moment frozen in time with the exuberant look of someone who feels their life is a joy and is certain that it will never end. Oh yes, but this killing in Manchester, it didn't just happen as if simply falling from the sky. There were reasons, there were root causes, and there was a context. And he talks about Salman Abedi, Libyan origin, etc., etc. Terror groups thrive when Western leaders overreact to their provocations. They desperately hope their actions will frighten people and prompt political leaders to respond with overwhelming force that serves only to undermine personal freedoms and sow division within their communities. That is their goal. That instinct for melodrama was on full display this week on a variety of political levels.
Melodrama.
Yeah, melodrama.
Oh, boy. Is this
Melodrama.
guy earning the Worst Canadian of the Year award? God. That's
this
totally inhuman
well,
melodrama.
This fellow Birdman has put himself beyond the pale.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond pale. It is never their fault. Now, this idea that this fellow in Manchester and his accomplices, however many there might be, if something like 16 people have been arrested so far.
Including his father and brother in Libya.
Libya, yeah, and that that this has something to do with Donald Trump enthusiastically siding with Saudi Arabia and its Sunni Arab neighbors against its regional rival Iran.
Is that what Birdman's blaming it on?
That's right.
Oh, God. That's
right.
Okay. Stay in retirement, buddy. Stay in retirement. Stay quiet.
Well, no, I mean, I don't, you or I can't call up the Toronto Star and say, I want to write 1,000 words on Manchester. Oh, really? What line are you taking? Donald Trump's fault. Oh, sure. We'll have that in on Saturday's paper.
Mm-hmm. How does $200 sound? Well, it's not much, but, it's more the point I want to make anyway. But, I mean, seriously, there were some people pointed out that, had Donald Trump's policies of travel bans been imposed in Britain, this bombing wouldn't have occurred because the guy, I think, had returned from Libya just 4 days prior to the bombing. So,
now, there's
mention that?
Something on the Intercept, someone named Mehdi Hassan, I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, and I don't know who this fellow is, but reactions to Manchester bombing show how anti-Muslim bigots are useful idiots for ISIS. This is similar to what I found when I was curious after being menaced by a dog one night, dog on a leash. What can one do to prevent being attacked by a dog? Or is there anything that one can do? So I went to a bunch of dog sites on the internet, and what I found out was the dog is always right. It's your fault. It's always your fault. Because you have done something, or not done something, in order to provoke this attack. And apparently these Muslims, they have no agency. Of course, they're not really Muslims, but apparently they are Muslims because it's our hatred, our bigotry that is driving them to these acts of terror.
So they're not really Muslims, but they are. And I'm supposed to square this circle. Why?
And then we had Anne Applebaum attacking Morrissey and calling him a drama queen. Oh, because he's homosexual, you get to call him a drama queen. Now, as other people pointed out, if someone had said about Anne Applebaum, identified her as a Jew, this would not have gone down very well. But no, this ridiculous response by Morrissey, and Morrissey's response was pretty much, let's just talk about who did this and why. Because people are not talking about who did it and why. It really is as if that it has fallen from the sky.
Oh, there was quite a few examples of that kind of thinking. I think there was a tweet that you had referenced once where this woman was wringing her hands saying that, oh, we'll never understand what happened. It's beyond comprehension. And I don't, I guess that's where they classify this. But in order to keep from thinking about it, they simply, it's beyond comprehension, I guess.
Well, it's beyond comprehension. Enoch Powell ended his speech this way. As I look ahead, I am filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I seem to see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. that tragic and intractable phenomenon, which we watch with horror on the other side of the Atlantic, but which there is interwoven with the history and existence of the states itself, is coming upon us here by our own volition and our own neglect. Indeed, it has all but come. In numerical terms, it will be of American proportions long before the end of the century. Only resolute and urgent action will avert it even now. Whether there will be the public will to demand and obtain that action, I do not know. All I know is that to see and not to speak would be the great betrayal. Now,
maybe that's a better title for the podcast. The Great Betrayal.
Well, you see, America has this problem, original sin, if you will, of slavery. Slavery on American soil. Britain does not have this problem. Canada does not have this problem. We decided to import it. Our own volition and our own neglect. Let's bring in all of these people who are not like us at all, and many of whom belong to a religion which is in fanatical opposition to the way that we live, and then we wring our hands after each outrage. Yeah, but are we really even wringing our hands? After the Manchester bombing, Justin Trudeau, our boy emperor, put out his pro forma tweet, which neglected to use the word prayers, because I suppose it was put to him that some people might find this offensive. I suppose atheists would find it offensive, but perhaps Muslims might find it offensive because, which God are you praying to?
And now, for what?
Well, yes. And I believe it was the next day he put out a longer statement in which he talked about ascertaining the possible impact of this event. Impact. Or how, people in Manchester had been impacted. Impacted, you mean like being blown to bits? Is that what you mean?
Impacted by shrapnel.
Yes.
No, I don't think he meant that.
You may have, you noticed this yourself, I'm sure, that with each successive terrorist attacks, the outrage, the horror, the shock become vitiated. This is the way we live now.
Sure. Didn't the mayor of London say it is the price you pay for living in a big city? Something insensitive like that, for which he, I don't think he apologized, but he seemed to shut up afterwards, perhaps realizing what an a-hole he sounded like.
Well, he may have, but the Metropolitan Police was keen to let Britons know that mean tweets was the biggest problem. And that, call our snitch line. Because, we are determined to combat Islamophobia. Now, Islamophobia... Can we call the
British police what they are? Traitors. Assholes.
Well, I don't know.
British police have performed so poorly.
They found that, this is what happened in the Soviet Union. Now, fighting criminals, apprehending criminals is a dangerous and nasty business. However, if you redefine criminality to include, say, political gestures, then that makes your job a lot easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, that actually gets mentioned in the River of Blood speech when they talk about that lady, where she begins to wonder if she's convinced. She becomes convinced she will go to prison after the race relations bill is passed. Powell says, "And is she so wrong? I begin to wonder." Actually, he's using the words of somebody else there, but yeah, that became a worry back then. And now, of course, it's a day-to-day reality in Britain.
Well, yes, prosecutions for such speech are commonplace in Britain now.
Yeah, Breitbart, I think, had a story about some police officer hit the panic button after she wandered into some party where they had a karaoke version of some anti-Osama bin Laden song. It's just one of these ridiculous moments that made the news. I guess we're not allowed to criticize Osama bin Laden now in Britain. Sad, sad place.
Well, a political establishment that is going to blame the people who are attacked. Now, you could blame governments. It is certainly true enough that we have invited terrorism by our actions in the Middle East. I'm not going to deny it. It's true. One of the things that we could do, perhaps, is stop intervening in the Middle East, because everything we do there only makes things worse. We could do that. But we have this very strange policy that we regularly reduce various countries in the Middle East to rubble, and then we invite the survivors to live here. And then we are surprised when it turns out they are full of resentment.
Right. Yes. This applies, I suppose, to all groups. The reason I say that is, we never really did draw the direct connection between the rivers of blood and the Manchester bombing. It seems obvious that this is the type of thing that Powell was talking about. Is it possible he was talking about something else? Because maybe a lot of people assumed the blood that was running was going to be those of the immigrants as instead of the populace.
Well, then they would be foolish or dishonest if to think that.
Okay, well, I didn't know if there was any context for that.
No, Powell was a classical scholar, and his reference to Virgil would have been understood by many people at the time.
And you have to explain it now, Kevin.
No, he was. I'll just say that he was quoting Virgil. We can show the passage there. Again, in our show notes. But it's difficult not to give way to despair or to fury at moments like this. And I've been thinking about what is the proper response. Something needs to be done. Can anything be done through present political mechanisms? If the existing political mechanisms are to be used, how long would it take for us to start getting action? I mean, it has been made clear that race replacement is the goal. And have you ever seen Scorsese's movie Kundun?
No, I haven't, no.
Well, it shows the Dalai Lama negotiating with Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong, come on, play along. We're going to run Tibet. Don't be silly. This is the modern ages. You can't have your country. And, they kill a whole bunch of people. And then Mao Zedong, he just plays his trump card, which is we're going to start moving large numbers of Han Chinese into Tibet. In other words, we are going to replace you. This population replacement leads to permanent anguish and horror. We've seen it in Northern Ireland, where the British moved all these Scots in there to replace the Irish. We've seen it in the Baltics, where the Russians the Soviet Union moved all of these ethnic Russians in to replace the native people. Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore, but those people are still there.
And strife surrounds them, yes. Well, I mean, we saw Trump, by threatening the mechanism of building a wall, chill the illegal immigration into the United States. So the threat or the animosity that was generated or proven to be popular in the United States seems to have staunched the flow somewhat. So there's that, right? I mean, you talk about how long would it take to see results. Well, all you do is just make people feel unwelcome and they don't show up.
Yeah, but the refugees are going to be pouring in to the United States again. The State Department decided that. And we have DACA. And I don't want a black pill here. It just...
Yeah.
Enoch Powell was speaking about repatriation.
Right.
He was actually talking about moving the numbers in the other direction, and no one seems to think that that's possible anymore. I mean, you have these people who talk about ethno-states, and I don't. People ask me about it. I don't know what to say. Except that, do you want something like the 30 Years' War here? Because they're not going to leave I mean, we can't force them to leave without violence. It's that simple.
Right, yeah.
But I've been thinking about this, and I thought, well, with regard to Anne Applebaum, that, I mean, there's something that we can do that we're not doing. That I just don't, someone like Tony Berman, you know, when you meet someone like this, when you're invited to shake their hands or such like, or be polite to them, no. Why should we be polite to traitors, to people who want to destroy our countries? You know, turn your head. You know, I would perhaps make the cross with the two fingers, the anti-vampire cross. These people deserve nothing but contempt, and that's all that we owe them. I mean, maybe that doesn't sound like much of a solution, but it is something concrete. And I think that it would hearten people if on a personal basis they stopped being complicit with these evil regimes that rule our lives. They're surrendering us to the terrorists in all sorts of ways, and we are not allowed. We are told that it's our own fault. We are told that there's nothing that we can do about it, and that we are told that these people are superior to us, that our murderers are superior to us.
Well, I think that the alt-right was a beginning of a response. It was an FU to the people that make these statements. Of course, it's got to spread a little more to the general populace. I've noticed that they're shutting down comments more and more on news sites because people are, you know, bringing it up, and they are, you know, saying what they think. They seem very much in line with the Powell speech. So, I mean, there's hope in that regard. Maybe that this will coalesce into some kind of political will. I don't know.
Well, we have a new leader of the Conservative Party, a new opposition leader in Canada. His name is Andrew Shearer. He's a callow young man. He seems like a nice fellow. He's got 5 children that all have normal names. He made it clear that he was having no part of Kelly Leitch's plan for vetting immigrants.
Sure. Yeah. Well, that became toxic, didn't it?
It became toxic. It became toxic, I suppose, because pollsters reported that something like 3/4 of Canadians were in favor of this. When you get up to like 75% support, you're up at the support of ice cream and fluffy kittens.
Well, guess what, Canada? Guess what, world? Kelly Leitch was on the right side of history, and so we will probably get vetting.
Well, this is my warning for the opponents, Kelly Leitch, which is that what she was standing for is called liberalism. It's an entirely moderate position. The immoderate position would be to shut down immigration entirely. Now, actually, I don't know that it's all that immoderate because we don't need immigrants. 5,000 to 10,000 a year, that's all we need. Another immoderate position, or extreme, if you will, position, would be we're not taking any more Muslims. That's it. Right?
Right, yeah.
And instead, Kelly Leitch took the position that yes, immigration is good for Canada, but we want to be sure that we're getting the right people and we're not getting the wrong people. Now, it was predictable that people on the left would rail against what, as I pointed out, is liberalism. Now, but for someone like Andrew Shearer to go out of his way to let people know that no, he doesn't support Kelly Leitch's position because it would be policing people's thoughts. Well, here's the thing. These people aren't Canadians. Would-be immigrants have no rights. They can be refused for any reason or none. We want to know what's inside their head before they get here. Now, some people will say that, they're just going to lie. Oh, okay, and with that reasoning, the police should stop interrogating suspects. Because, they know that they could go to prison, so they're going to lie, aren't they?
Yes. Also, if they lie, though, we can also use that as a reason for deportation, can't we?
Yes, we can. But the thing is that, you see, interrogation is a science, and I'm not, even talking about using forceful measures or torture. That surprisingly, and the police find this all the time, that they'll put it to someone that they committed some crime, like an armed robbery or whatever, and they'll cop to it on the spot. And they won't ask for a lawyer, even though they have the right to one free.
Mm-hmm.
And others, with skillful questioning, you can get them to admit things that they wouldn't admit at first. But this idea that this is what Andrew Shearer is endorsing is nothing less than a suicide pact.
Yes, I have to agree with that. And I don't know. I'm kind of hoping that I'm right, that we are going to get this after a few more bombings like the Ariana Grande thing in Manchester, because there's going to be more, of course, and they're going to take us totally by surprise, and we're not going to know what caused them. People are talking about this kind of thing. They're not at all convinced. And I guess the truth will out. I mean, that's what we learned from looking at the Rivers of Blood speech by Enoch Powell, is that he's proved right after all these years, after all that vilification, and, he dies in shame or whatever, as this awful man who gave this awful speech, and now everybody's saying, well, I guess he was right. Well, if he's right, we still have the speech.
Have you heard about the Century Initiative?
No, I have not.
This is, there was a plan, which the Americans wisely rejected, for post-war Germany, called the Morgenthau Plan. And essentially, it was going to destroy Germany. It was going to reduce it to a plain, an open plain. This is the Canadian equivalent of this. It's called the Century Initiative, and its goal is 100 million Canadians in 2100. You can go to the website. You can see their videos. Mm-hmm. You can see what they're on about. They have this bizarre idea that a country's greatness can be judged by how many people it has. And this is repeated again and again. And they're absolutely serious about this. Well, I guess that Indonesia, that must be like right up there, right? Everyone's talking about Indonesia and how we, need to be more like Indonesia. And they talk about the GDP. Once again, it's very easy to increase the GDP. If we were to import, 10 million people from Nigeria in the next 5 years, that would result in a greatly increased GDP. However, it would result in a greatly decreased average income.
How do these people, square the climate change circle? By the way, the fact that that's going to take a whole lot of coal to keep those houses warm.
I didn't even look at that. I mean, perhaps it's a deficiency on my part. I just can't take climate change seriously.
Well, no, but I mean, are these the climate deniers? I mean, holy smokes, 100 million people.
Where's the infrastructure? Where's the infrastructure? Let's talk about the urban infrastructure. We know that something like 75% of all immigrants go to Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal. Canadians have mobility rights guaranteed to them by the Constitution. Immigrants, we must settle immigrants here, right? Mm-hmm. And then they take a look around and they see that there's not enough of their own people there, and so they head to Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal. Of course, people talk about this, we need to spread out the immigration. Yeah, okay, Prince Edward Island isn't paused yet, so let's wreck it. Mm. 100 million people and what? And how many? Is Toronto going to be a city of what, 30 million? Is that the idea? Is Vancouver going to be a city of 20 million? Is that the idea?
Surviving on what? That's what I'm curious about.
Soylent.
Yeah. Okay.
But okay, so I only found out about this in the last couple of days, but I thought this would appeal to you for the reason which I'm going to reveal. That our team consists of 6 founders, 3 staff, an advisory board, and many thought partners. Thought partners, never heard that before. So who is supporting this? CIBC, One of our quasi-monopoly banks, Loyalty One, never heard of that. Cisco, which is in the computer systems business. New brand, Justining. I don't know what that is. But let's look at some of the people here. Let's look at some of the people behind this monstrous scheme. Dominic Barton, Managing Director, McKinsey & Company. Okay. Globalist, big-time globalist. Willa Black, VP Corporate Affairs, Cisco. Tom Milroy, Generation Capital Limited. Goldie Hyder of Hill & Knowlton, PR Spiv Supreme. Mark Wiseman, BlackRock Alternative Investors. Andrew Pickersgill, McKinsey & Company. You're getting an idea here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of these are some of the top globalists. Advisory board, Naomi Alboim, chair of the policy forum. She's described as an immigration activist. She looks like Michael Corrin were a woman. Actually, I'm not exaggerating. Seriously.
Okay.
Francesco
Put in some
Aquilino.
links for you people to understand why I shuddered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Managing partner, Aquilini Group. Oh, and here's the one I thought you'd like. Andre Desmarais, Deputy Chairman, President, and Co-Chief Executive Officer, Power Corporation of Canada. Perhaps you could tell our listeners a little bit about the relationship of the Desmarais family and Power Corp to Canada.
Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Power Corp is the company that runs Canada. How do they do it? Well, they do it mostly through appointments to Privy Council and deputy ministers and things like that. Their board does that kind of thing. They've been doing it since, well, as far as I know, since before 1968. Maurice Strong owned that company from about, what was it? The early 60s anyway. Sold it to Paul Desmarais, and Paul Desmarais continued from 1968 onward about making connections with Pierre Trudeau, Brian Mulroney. He basically was the man who appointed our prime ministers. For many years, he hooked in heavily with China, getting 5% of their, I forget, was it CITIC, their corporation run by the Chinese army, and making a pile of loot. He also made a pile of loot when the CBC was broken up and sold off as well. Anyways, yes, that is the company that runs Canada. Andre Desmarais is married to, I think, Jean Chrétien, former prime minister, his daughter.
Her name is France.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I think so. I don't know. I've never really paid much attention to her, but I think he's the brother. There's two brothers now that inherited it from Paul Desmarais. It's Paul Desmarais Jr. and Andre Desmarais. They've inherited from their father. These guys are just balls to wall businessmen, globalists.
Yeah, I'll just break in to say that France Chrétien Desmarais, CM, is a Canadian lawyer and businesswoman. She is the daughter of Jean Chrétien. She is married to André Desmarais, who is the son of Paul Desmarais. She's chairman of the board of the Montreal Heart Institute Foundation, and she's a member of the Order of Canada. For what I cannot imagine. But what does it say to you that this Century Initiative bears the imprimatur of Desmarais and Power Corp?
Well, it says to me, based on what I wrote before back in the mid-aughts for Western Standard Magazine, that a good portion of those people coming to Canada are going to be spillover from China because they were so hooked in with the Chinese. So, yeah, we're just going to get a ton of Chinese peasants here, and they're going to take over the country. I don't know, but I know it's not going to be French Canadians or Anglo Canadians. That's all. That's what it says to me.
Well, I wanted to point to the Century Initiative because these are the deep state people, the people behind the scenes. Well, they're doing many things, one of which is pulling Justin Trudeau's strings because this guy's too much of a dimwit to run anything. And that's not hyperbole.
No, not at all.
But know your enemy. Forewarned is forearmed. Go to the Century Initiative site, read about their monstrous plan, and identify the people who are actively working to destroy Canada.
I'm sure there's a similar plan for Britain. I'm sure that Canadians didn't develop this on their own. they're modeling it after something or other, Or maybe Britons have modeled theirs after ours. It's hard to say, but I'm sure you can find evidence of it. So we're importing Enoch Powell. Perhaps we can start a century initiative of our own where we project the population to be 30,000 by 2100. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know what you're getting at there, but
well, we actually lower the population.
Yeah, 30. Yeah, okay. Now this goes beyond the 30 Years' War. No, I can't endorse that. We have a permanent problem, perhaps insoluble problem here. But there's no point in the preventable evils that we are getting very close in this country and in the United States and in Britain and in France and Germany to a war of all against all. To give you one example, when you read about these mosques that are being set on fire or splashed with paint or otherwise despoiled, it seems increasingly likely that these are Shia mosques and they're being attacked by Sunni Muslims, but the media doesn't want to talk about that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
The mosque in Peterborough?
Uh-huh.
Shia mosque.
Still not solved as far as I know either.
Still not solved. Yes, still not solved.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now let's just wrap up on old Enoch here. We, of course, are doing this program because we see him vindicated. Does this get official in any sense? Who's going to be the first world leader to quote from this speech?
Well, Margaret Thatcher was quite friendly with Enoch Powell.
She's dead?
Yeah, she's dead. I mean, and she wasn't, she didn't have enough courage to follow through. I mean, she was too ambitious. Who'll be the first world leader? Oh, I don't know. I think that perhaps one of the things that we can do is to get rid of the quislings within our own ranks. I mean, these people must be removed. Oh,
well, they have to be identified, and then what is the mechanism to remove them from influence? Is that what you're saying?
Humiliation.
Mm-hmm.
Relentless mockery. Someone like Peter Hitchens, who I've read his books. I have a lot of time for him. But, oh no, Enoch Powell shouldn't have spoken. Oh no, we can't talk about race. Oh, it's not about race. Well, it is. It's about race and religion and clans and tribes, just as it always has been throughout human history. Just because it makes Peter Hitchens uncomfortable doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
You pick on the Quislings and then say something nice about them. Aren't there worse Quislings? Isn't Tony Birdman a worse Quisling? How do we remove him?
Birdman's not on our side.
Yeah, okay.
And I suppose the other thing that we could do is just to make sure that, this nice young Andrew Shearer fellow, I haven't voted in elections since 2001. I'll admit that. The reason why is there was nothing about any of these candidates that appealed to me. Now, I voted for Raheem Jaffer in 2000, and you know how that worked out.
Oh, yeah. Snorting coke?
No, they're not proved. Not proved.
Oh, sorry.
Not proved.
Okay. Carrying coke.
Oh, well, that charge was dropped. That charge was dropped, and I believe the drunk driving charge was dropped as well. And
how did it turn out,
the allegations of busty hookers, well, they remain unproved.
Okay.
But
right.
my point is that there is one thing that we can do. We have seen indications that Donald Trump intends to fight for his own people, and to the extent that he's actually accomplishing things, he deserves our support. But I see no reason to support politicians who make it clear that they are on board with the destruction of our countries.
Okay.
We don't even have to vote for the bad guys. Yeah. We can just not vote at all.
So I take it you're not recommending people vote for this May woman Because she seems pretty globalist to me.
Theresa May is she's a professional woman. She rose high in the Conservative Party because she was a woman, solely because she's a woman. She's a very noxious woman who's made it clear that the traditional stalwarts of conservatism, that she hates them. Oh, they're not inclusive enough, etc., etc.
Like I say, you're not endorsing her.
No.
Back to Nigel. Okay. Who has said interesting and good things about Powell, which we will link to as well. All right, we're coming to the end, Kevin. Is there anything that you'd like to finish off with?
No.
Oh, and by the way, Kevin, I just wanted to plug your interview with our fellow Canadians. The podcast this hour has 88 minutes on the Right Stuff Network. We'll put a link into that. I'd listened to that, and you had a good, lively discussion about music and about our wonderful country here and the problems therein. They did a good job on that, so I definitely want to congratulate you on that and draw people's attention to it.
No, it was quite entertaining to do.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you. It sounded like you had a good time. That was obvious to me. So, good job, you guys too, for inviting us. Thank you, or inviting Kevin. I'd also like to take just a second here at the end of our podcast to mention once again that we have started a Patreon account at patreon.com/2kevins. The link is on our front page, and it'll be on this in the show notes as well, where we detail a plan, a goal, and a plan, how we will execute the plan to achieve the goal, which includes the production of 4 books. You can pledge your support to that with a monthly donation, and if you read through the whole plan, you'll see we've got a few incentives there as well that we're offering for donations of approximately $8.50 a month. After half a year, you qualify at the $50 level, and a year at the $100 level, which will be, the incentives will be a couple of signed books that we produce. Did you want to say anything about that?
Well, and of course, listeners who like our show can continue to support us via the PayPal button.
That's right.
To Kevin's website, and we remain very grateful indeed to the people who support us and the people who have supported us in the past.
Oh, I did want to add that those of you who are not going to go the Patreon route but are going to donate through the PayPal button, if you include in your comment in the PayPal form that this is for the Patreon project, if you donate over $100, you do qualify for those incentives, but you should note in there, in your donation, that you'd like to be involved in that, so that you just write for the Patreon project or for the Patreon plan right there in your donation, and we'll make sure that you'll get all that's coming to you. Okay, so now we've come to the end, the official end of episode 82 of Grace and Steel. I'm Kevin Steele.
And I'm Kevin Michael Grace.